Nobody sets out to build an incoherent system, but as schools, we tend to buy things like one component at a time.
Yes.
And that doesn't always ensure that those components actually fit together.
Hello there. My name is Monica Burns, and welcome to today's bonus episode of the Easy EdTech podcast. If you're used to joining me on Tuesdays for new episodes, you are in for a treat. This is a special bonus episode of the podcast in partnership with Renaissance. Just like on Tuesdays, these bonus episodes are designed to give you ideas you can try yourself, share with a colleague, or bookmark for later in the school year. If we mention something you'd like to check out, you'll find the link to it in the show notes. So don't forget to head to my website, easyedtechpodcast.com, for all of the links and resources from today's and every episode. This episode is sponsored by Renaissance. Renaissance is proud to introduce Renaissance Intelligence, a connected system that brings assessment, instruction, practice, curriculum, and trustworthy AI together to help educators make confident decisions faster about student learning. This intelligence system is built on 40 years of learning science and EdTech expertise. It keeps the teacher at the center of instruction and is designed for how K-12 classrooms actually work. Learn more at renaissance.com/intelligence. On today's episode, I'm welcoming back Dr. Jean Kerns to talk about AI in a way that might be a little different from how educators usually think about it. Dr. Kerns is the Chief Academic Officer at Renaissance, where he spent more than 2 decades. He's a nationally acclaimed speaker on assessment, learning progressions, educational standards, you name it. This is going to be a fantastic conversation. I can't wait for you to jump in and listen. Jean unpacks what instructional coherence really means. It's a term you're going to want to add to your vocab if it's not in it already. And we chat about why fragmented tools and data overwhelm teachers and how AI can help bring it all together in a way that really keeps teachers and learning at the center. Let's jump into the conversation. Welcome back to the podcast. I am so excited to have you on today to talk about AI in a different way than maybe educators might think about it. So, Dr. Kerns, can you share a bit with listeners about your role in education? What does your day-to-day look like?
Oh, thanks, Monica. Glad to be back. Jean Kerns. I've served as the Chief Academic Officer at Renaissance, where I've been for over 20 years now. I had no vision of working for an educational technology company, but I was a third-generation educator. We're up to the 5th generation now in the family. And we had so much success with products from Renaissance that when they approached me now 2 decades ago and said, "Hey, would you consider coming to work for us?" I kind of had to think, well, that's something I hadn't thought about. Maybe that would be interesting. Maybe you ought to try it. So I said, I'll try it. And apparently it stuck. So my role now is really helping the company by trying to keep up to date on the latest research, the latest in pedagogy. One of my close colleagues is government affairs. So what's going on in policy over there?
Absolutely.
So what's happening instructionally and pedagogically? What's coming out of science, in research, cognitive science, those types of things, to make sure that what we're doing is aligned with the best current thinking and thought about what teaching and learning should be.
And that's so much of what I'm excited to talk about today, just your perspective, the things that you're hearing, that you're seeing, the research around, the topics that we'll unpack today, and really addressing some of the challenges that I know I hear about, that I'm sure you hear about too. One of which that I hear a lot from educators is, how their tech tools, all the things that they interact with during their day don't really, they don't talk to each other. Assessment data might live in one place, curriculum in another platform, student practice tools in another spot. What does that fragmentation actually cost educators and students on a daily basis? What gets lost when the data and tools aren't connected?
Yeah, I think that's a classic problem we're all dealing with. And, if you roll back the clock, I mean, I started now, more than 30 some years ago, data-driven decision making was kind of new
Hmm.
then, and we didn't really have much data. So we longed
Yeah.
for data. And now the conversation has shifted to, oh my gosh, I've got so much data, I
Hmm.
can't even make sense of it. So I think we're in a little bit of an overwhelming kind of period right now, was where we're classically, when these things are in different places, at worst, it's not all integrated, or not. I mean, at best, it's not all integrated. At worst, it's overwhelming and frustrating and those types of things that, like, I don't know how
Hmm.
to make my way through all of that to find the really, like, the insight that I need for tomorrow. And teaching it just doesn't stop. We have to acknowledge what a teacher's day is like, and there just are not a lot of times to pause and reflect. So if we're adding a ton of data on top of it that's not immediately relevant, we are not making the situation better.
Yeah. And that's such a great point about how things have changed when, we might have always, right, kind of yearned for better data, right, or more data or real time, right, data. And now we have it, but it might just be overwhelming, right, for an educator who, as you alluded to, or has a busy schedule, right, with, the best of intentions. There's just not enough time to go through things and to know for sure, which information is truly actionable. I think that
Yeah.
can end up being frustrating for someone who knows, for an educator who knows like that they want that next step, but aren't, quite sure where to go. And, their term instructional coherence is one I really wanted to unpack with you today. It's a term educators may have encountered. Maybe it's the first time they're hearing these two words, put
Yeah.
together. But how do you define instructional coherence? Why is it something district leaders should be paying attention to?
Yeah. I mean, I always tell people, I mean, to borrow a term from social media, instructional coherence is trending. I mean, there are more and more
Mhm.
reports out there. And I told you, part of my job is
Yeah.
watching what is happening. How is pedagogical thought shifting? I think it all comes down to this. Do the different things that we do with kids, do they all fit together? And it's
Mhm.
hard enough to achieve in a classroom. But then when a kid, for example, might receive extra time services, it is even harder. So, like, if you're the interventionist that supports me, do you know what I'm doing every day with a kid? Or is it a matter that they come to Mr. Kerns's room and we're doing one thing, and then we went to Mrs. Burns's room and we're doing something else?
Mhm.
And so it's, how do all the parts fit together? Now, standards and curriculum, when let's face it, textbooks become kind of like the proxy for curriculum. That stuff fits together pretty well because people basically say, well, I have standards. So I went out, I bought a book
Mhm.
aligned to my standards. And the books are so powerful because, like, they take over the role. Like, they supplant the standards. Like, no teacher goes and looks at standards documents every day, but they look at their textbook every day.
Absolutely.
Up to that point, we don't have a coherence problem. It's when we have to add anything else. So we have to have assessments for certain purposes. Often we need practice products because most curricula don't have enough opportunities for kids to
Mhm.
practice the skills. And Lord help a kid that needs, support in intervention. Every time we add another product, another layer, another person, another setting, we have to think to ourselves, do these things fit together in
Yeah.
logical ways? And often they don't. And nobody sets out to build an incoherent system. But as schools, we tend to buy things like one component at a
Mhm.
time. And
Yes.
that doesn't always ensure that those components actually fit
Yeah.
together.
Mhm. And I think that, like you said, right, someone comes into that conversation looking to meet all the needs, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that things are going to be smooth for, all of the stakeholders, right, in a school community. So kind of getting back to the data piece, right? And what it looks like when there is, so much data coming in from all these different tools for all the different students, say an educator might work with, or that a school leader, right, is reviewing to just get a picture, right, of what's happening in their community. How do you think about the role of data in supporting teachers without overwhelming them? Where is the line between giving educators useful information and just giving them too much to sort through?
That is such an important question, I think, for everybody to explore. So, if we will, I mean, there's a lot of data; it's all sources. Let me just look at it through the lens of assessment, if that's
Yeah.
okay. And I remember I had the opportunity to be at the table when our founder Terry Paul kind of made the decision that we were really going to be a bigger assessment company. And one of the things he said is, we got to be careful about the amount of information we give teachers. You give them the right amount, it's wonderful. You give them too much, and it's paralyzing. So
Mhm.
I think this, the data we need intersects with the coherence conversation. And one of the things that we're trying to do at Renaissance is to ingest the knowledge of like what textbook are you using. So, kids take assessments all the time for screening
Yeah.
purposes for MTSS, and every single one of those produces instructional planning information. My kid took an assessment. Can you tell me about what the kid needs? But the problem is that system has no ability typically to understand what textbook you're using. Now, if we know that, which is something we're bringing in, then we can say, instead of me giving you a general instructional planning report that has all possible skills, all possible domains, if I know that you're about to do, just as an example, a geometry unit next week,
Mhm.
then I can filter through all that information and only give you what is immediately relevant to
Yeah.
the unit you're teaching. That's the kind of hope that we have for the future, saying a really coherent assessment would know what unit you are in so that the information it could give you would be you would see the immediate relevance
Mhm.
instead of saying, I've got this long list of things I got to figure in there what
Right.
really relevant to me. But we're getting to the point with new technologies that more of that can be automated. So I think we've gotten to the really awkward, I mean, let's say the awkward adolescent phase of
Mhm.
data-driven decision making. Now, cool, we might be on the verge of moving into like solid adulthood and getting this right.
And any teacher, myself included, right, who's gotten these long reports, right, who's
Mhm.
gotten PDF files, right, emailed to them, it's just, as a classroom teacher, it was so overwhelming to do what you're describing, right? Decide what's really actionable, not, in this huge open future, but like tomorrow, next
Yeah.
week, right? This unit, right? And it makes such a difference when you have information that you can really use, right? As
Mhm.
opposed to just a lot of info. So when you think about what AI can do in education, what impact can AI have in the way teachers plan and prepare their lessons and even interventions for individual
Yeah.
students?
Yeah, that's what we're really working on this edge of how do you use AI so that it can cull through all possible data and
Mhm.
produce those best recommendations for you. So, I mean, historically, you could use like meta tags and keyword searches, but it's
Mhm.
getting so much more advanced. So, I think that is the very intersection of where we're working. Teacher, provide me the input of letting me know what unit you're on and what textbook. And then we've developed one of our multiple tools, but one we refer to as our AI learning engine that
Mhm.
really mines all the information about our standards from the states, the learning progressions that Renaissance has been building for about 20 years, all of the data we have for kids, and we'll basically say, okay, if that kid is about to encounter that unit that your pacing guide says is next, here's what I can tell you. This kid's ready for it, not ready for it. And more importantly, if they're not ready for it, let me
Mhm.
build you a prerequisite pathway that would support them in getting there.
Mhm.
Every ounce of that information is 100% relevant to the immediate context. Said differently, all of it is highly coherent. Instead of introducing, as you said, all those other skills that are valuable, but they're not
Right.
immediately relevant, those things
Yeah.
become noise. Let's filter out the noise and let's get to what really, really matters.
And I think for educators who have 30 students that they're doing, work with in multiple content areas throughout the day, an educator who has 140 students,
Hmm.
or whatever it might be, it really is around prioritizing and getting rid of some of that noise, like you mentioned. And, it's exciting to think about, what's possible as things are growing and shifting, particularly in the AI space. So what should educators be looking for when they evaluate whether an AI powered tool
Hmm.
is actually going to make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, for me, and a lot of people don't realize this. I wrote a blog about this, and it's just that's something I keep coming back to. We, for example, have probably said Chat GPT a million times.
Yeah. Mhm.
But most people don't realize what those letters stand for. So, I mean, chat, we get that. We're going to chat with
Right.
the
Yeah.
tool. G, generative, it's going to make something for you. Well, they all do, whether it's Chat GPT or Claude or all the other, big frontier models that are out there. GEP, the T part refers to the transforming aspect of the neural technology that does the work.
Mhm.
The P, there's the difference because P stands for pre-trained. So the question that I always ask is, if you're offering me an AI tool, what is it pre-trained on?
Yes. Mhm.
We know that when these tools simply go out and look at the entire internet, then we're going to get back in the responses the quality of the entire internet.
Yeah.
The good, the bad, the ugly, the biased, the unbiased, the
Mhm.
accurate, and the inaccurate. So the most important question to me is, what is it pre-trained on? When I ask this tool to do something, what is
Mhm.
it looking at? And that's where I think that companies like Renaissance, who've really been in education for a long time, I think that's where we have an opportunity to really shine. The
Yeah,
startup companies don't have anything to pre-train their tools on. They may have great technology, but they just don't have a history to feed into that great technology. And the
absolutely.
behemoths out there, of course, they've got all the algorithms and all the tools, but they contract them out to other people, and they still don't have a history and education to feed into
Mhm.
that. But when you've been doing teaching and learning, and you know lesson design and learning progressions and standards and assessment, this is a lot of information that you can pre-train your model on. So I think, for educators, it needs to be, well, where do I get AI tools that are built by other educators for educators using
Mhm.
a history of education? These are the tools that I think are going to make the real difference, not the generalized tools, jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah. And it's a really good point for someone who is evaluating different tools and resources, the kind of questions to ask, what to look for in those responses that they may or may not get, right, from someone who isn't quite sure, right, how to
Yeah.
answer that question. So you mentioned, right, Renaissance just launched something new. It's called Renaissance Intelligence.
Mhm.
How does Renaissance Intelligence connect assessment, instruction, and practice in a way that's different from what educators might be used to?
Yeah, in many ways, it transform the entire process. So
Mhm.
with intelligence, we move from selling individual applications that people buy and combine to a single, like, total unified experience. So I don't have to go to different places to get my data because all of my data is in one place. And I don't have to get recommendations to go out and have a kid practice in one program or pull assessment data from somewhere else or assign a lesson somewhere else like Nearpod, because it's all integrated in
Mhm.
one. So imagine a place where all the information you have on kids is all pulled together, where our AI learning engine mines all that information to understand where the kid is in relation to your curriculum and standards, and knows based on an assessment history exactly where that kid is performing. And then the second tool, the alignment engine, says, well, okay, if you've told me that this is where this kid is, here are all the resources that align with that. I can tell you what lesson plans, I can tell
Yeah.
you what practice activities, and we even have a partner program with major publishers. So for those textbook that are partners of ours, it's not just a matter that our alignment engine can point to our resources, but we can
Mhm.
also point to their resources. And it's all done through that lens of coherence. Tell
Yeah.
me what unit you're on. Tell me what book you were using, and I will present to you every piece of information about the skills your kids will be acquiring and all of the lessons and all the resources. You said before, you're talking about like teachers and like the number of kids they serve. And let me
Right.
just admit something and just throw it on the table. Like, I get really nervous when people start talking about personalized learning because I'm
Mhm.
like, you in what army? I mean,
Right.
as a high school
Yeah.
teacher, I taught 150 kids. Like, one time I had more
Mhm.
kids than I had desks in the room.
Yep.
To me, what we're doing with intelligence and allowing the AI to do so much in the background of or serving up recommendations for teachers. Now, nothing's assigned automatically. It's always, teacher, here's a
Mhm.
recommendation. You approve it. It's the first time I've ever looked at something and said, okay, now really personalizing might actually be doable at scale, because historically, like, I got lost in, yeah, you and what army,
Yeah.
me and what backup's ever going to pull that off, because I've got 150 kids coming and going
Right.
every day.
And that's such an important point to make. And, a lot of times when I talk to educators about, leveraging AI in different ways or how it might fit into their workflow, we often start with your to-do list, right? Like the little things that, you might use a chatbot to help with. But that next piece, I usually call it like your wish list, right? Like
Yeah.
all the things you wish, would be wonderful, but you just don't have the time or the backup, right? Or that extra support to be able to do. And I think it's a really interesting way to address the idea of scaling your impact, right? Like we know what would be wonderful to do, but can we now get that thing off of our wish list?
Yeah.
And, as you kind of think about the human piece, right? You said already how, you're getting recommendations, not like auto assignments. Can you tell us a bit more about what role, does AI play in Renaissance intelligence, and how did your team make sure it stayed human centered?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a couple of things there. I mean, one, as you said, a lot of the uses that we see of people like using AI in general, write an email for me, create a
Right.
graphic for me, create a
Hmm.
PowerPoint for me. We're trying to like blow way beyond that.
Right. Hmm.
And I kind of frame it this way. Imagine you had an always on, always eager, 24/7, 365 digital teaching assistant that could constantly monitor everything for you and send you all kinds of alerts and recommendations. I've
Hmm.
noticed that 4 kids are struggling with the same skill. If you're looking to form a
Right.
group today, here's the kids I would recommend
Perfect.
you put together. And it's those types of things. So the system is allowing a teacher to say, this is the unit I'm teaching. And you
Hmm.
get the recommendations, but then it's also tracking everything. Again, nothing's ever auto-assigned because at Renaissance, the two things we've always said is human in the loop. That's
Hmm.
important to us. Nothing gets rolled out to a kid without a human being reviewing it because we know as wonderful as these models are, the more dynamic they are, the more frontier models, they are, the more they got to be checked on. Now, ours is very tightly controlled.
Of
So, but even then, we want to make sure that the teacher says, yes,
course.
this makes sense. But the other thing for us is teacher at the center. Teaching is inherently social. It's a human interchange type of thing. So we don't build things that like supplant the teacher. We just want to support them in the
Yeah.
background. We
Hmm.
don't want to disrupt that teacher-student relationship. And I think, when you see all the conversations lately about screen time and the best use of
Hmm.
technology and these types of things, I think educators get themselves in trouble and companies get themselves in trouble when they don't respect that human interaction aspect that is teaching.
Hmm.
So again, for us, it's human in the loop. Nothing's automatically given to a kid that a human has not seen. And in that case, the teacher and teacher at the center. It speaks to what we're doing. We're trying to create that digital teaching assistant that, who at the end of the day, when the teacher has no more cognitive ability to keep up with what's going on, was able to look at last night's homework and say, did you realize that these 5 kids all struggle with the same skill? Like if you're looking
Yeah.
tomorrow to do a small group, here is a very strategic use of your time. Oh, and by the way, I've already identified for you 5 different resources you could use with that group. That is just, I mean, it's to me, when the teachers that are using this, they are over the moon because it's not just, you said wish list, it's almost dream
Right.
list.
Like
It's like,
another level.
I dream of something that will do that for me day in and day out because at
Hmm.
the end of the day, I don't want to be mining all these reports and doing all these spreadsheets and
Hmm.
doing all this data. I want to teach kids. And
Hmm.
this allows you to minimize the back end kind of tasks so that you can maximize the things that really teachers want to do more than anything else, which is be with kids and get them exactly what they need.
And that's amazing, and an amazing message, I think, for someone who's trying to find, what is possible, right, with this new type of technology. And I know, right, for anyone who's listening and is curious and wants to learn more, right, they can click on some of the links that I'll put in the show notes, of course, right? I know they're going to want to go out and explore. But for anyone who's, maybe on the move, right, got
Yeah.
a couple tabs open while they're listening, right, or wants to just make that mental bookmark for later,
Yeah.
where can listeners learn more about Renaissance Intelligence and connect with the Renaissance team?
Yeah, no surprise. All the information is at renaissance.com. We're going to have a, huge presence at ISTE. We're doing
Hmm.
events all over the country because I mean this is a major rollout for us. So we're going to, coming to a place soon near you, but the easiest way is to check out renaissance.com. Even if you go to renaissance.com/webinars, we've got a series of webinars that relate
Hmm.
to this. We did some big product launches where we kind of previewing the product and pictures worth 1,000 words. We could only say so many things on this podcast, but man, when we can open up the system and literally show you, here are the tabs, here's what it's done, here's what's done automatically for your teachers. Because I look at it this way, what the system is doing automatically is what the best teachers would do if they'd had enough time.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's the most precious resource we have in schools. Do I have enough time? I could have clicked around. I could have aggregated this data. I could have searched through all these resources. those are all the kinds of things that like AI tools can do really well. It
Yes.
can do the data,
Mhm.
it can search the resources. And what we're trying to create again is that system that serves up all the options for teachers. Here's what you need to know. You're about to start this unit. Who's going to blow through this unit really quickly because they're high performing? Who's ready for this unit? Who's not ready? And if they're not ready, what plan do they need to get them ready?
Mhm.
All structured, trying to be as coherent as possible through that lens of your grade level expectations, your standards, your curriculum. It is a new level of customization and personalization to the teacher's unique context that we've just not been able to do before. And it's merely because technology's evolved. So, we all should be making big jumps forward. And again, it's not write me an email, make me a
Mhm.
graphic,
Right.
turn this lesson into a PowerPoint. We should be finding fundamentally different ways to do our work. And that's what this represents.
And I think for anyone who hasn't heard the term instructional coherence until today, anytime that they're feeling like things are not very coherent, they're either going to come back to this conversation and understand, what is really possible for them.
Mm.
So thank you so much for your time today, for sharing these big ideas and the actionable piece that goes right along with it for listeners today.
No, thank you.
It was so much fun chatting with Dr. Kerns today, and I want to finish up this episode, like we always do, with a few key points to make this EdTech easy. Recognize that fragmented tools and disconnected data create noise that costs teachers time and clarity. Understand instructional coherence as whether all the pieces you use with a student actually fit together. Aim for data that is immediately relevant to the unit you are teaching, not long lists of every possible skill. When evaluating an AI tool, ask what it is pre-trained on, since data behind it shapes the quality of what comes out. Remember, you can find the show notes and full list of resources from this episode by heading over to easyedtechpodcast.com, including all of the ways to connect with a team at Renaissance. If you're listening on a podcast app like Apple Podcast or Spotify, you'll see the summary or episode description with plenty of links to explore too. A big thank you to today's sponsor, Renaissance. Renaissance Intelligence connects the loop from assessment to guided instruction and targeted reading and math practice, so insight becomes action when it matters most. Check out what's possible when insights, instruction, and learning science work together at renaissance.com/intelligence. If you're listening to today's episode on Apple Podcast or Spotify, maybe another favorite app, don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button. Totally free to follow along and subscribe to the podcast. And when you do follow with the podcast, each new episode is going to download, show up for you automatically in your podcast feed. That way you won't miss a thing. And if you have a moment and are feeling extra helpful today, we've got dozens of reviews on different platforms. Would love for you to add your star rating or your review of the podcast. It helps other educators decide if they want to check out a new episode, and really appreciate that extra support. Have a great week and check back on Tuesday morning, just a few days away, for another new episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast.